I mean, let's look at what's happened in this crisis, right? It's very, very serious cost of living crisis we're seeing here. We're going to see millions of families in this country struggling to feed themselves and to heat their homes. But at the same time, in the last 2 years, we've seen the biggest ever increase in millionaire and billionaire wealth in this country. It's ridiculous, really. Never in the history of economics has it been more obvious what needs to be done. And yet Rishi Sunak, whose father-in-law is himself a billionaire, has chosen not to do it. He's given very little, not enough, and he's done nothing to take more money from the rich, which there's plenty there, more than there's ever been in the past. There's these hangovers from the 80s, these ideas, if you tax them more, they'll leave, you can't get the money out of them. But listen, nothing could be further from the truth. I think what we've seen in the last few weeks with the Russian oligarchs is if the government wants to tax wealthy people, if the government wants to get access to those wealthy people, it can. And I think the media has not really made enough of the enormous amount of money made by the super rich during the crisis. And right at the beginning of COVID, I came out and said, look, the government is going to print a huge amount of money here. And they have done. It's 450 billion pounds. That is truly an enormous amount of money. It's 10,000 pounds for every adult in the country. Okay. So if anyone listening, if you don't have 10,000 pounds more now than you did 2 years ago, someone else has got that 10,000 pounds. And the facts are almost certainly they do, because the statistics show that money has been overwhelmingly accumulated by the rich, which means each individual rich person is sitting on something like 90,000, 100,000 pounds more than pre-COVID. Look, if you deal with a crisis in such a way that you pump 100,000 pounds into the bank account of every rich person in the country, you can't be surprised when you get inflation. And the way to fix that is to take that money back. But nobody's talking about it. They're not going to do it. And we're seeing the terrible consequences. Now, the only way to fix this is to get the money back from the rich. If you don't do that, we're going to see a disaster. And we are seeing it. Okay. When I was a trader, we didn't watch the statements because the statements are not about economics. The statements are about political theatre. Listen, Rishi Sunak has raised taxes significantly on ordinary working people. Okay. 2.5% extra on national insurance, which is everybody's wage and excludes the incomes of the super rich, by the way. He significantly increased tax on ordinary people. He's done that quietly. And now he's giving a few pounds back very, very loudly. Listen, it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. There's not a single family in this country for whom the small handouts given yesterday will even nearly make up for the massive increase of cost of living. We're talking about thousands of pounds extra cost of living for every family in this country. And in many, many cases, in millions of cases, that will be thousands of pounds, which they simply don't have. I think it's important for people to realize we are talking about people will lose their homes over this. People will not be able to pay the rent, to pay the mortgage. People will become homeless. It's a very, very serious situation. And then, if we can take it one step further, if you're taking £2,000-3,000 out of the disposable income of every family, well, that's their entire disposable income. So they can't go to the pub, they can't go to the cinema, they can't go on holiday, they can't go to the theatre, they can't go to restaurants. So it's going to destroy the economy of this country. Look, we made this mistake before in 2008. If you deal with a crisis in such a way that you impoverish the vast majority of people and make the rich super, super rich, all you're going to do is see a massive increase in house prices, a massive increase in stock prices, and the economy will be in a slump for 20 years. I'm probably getting too passionate about it, but this is really, really serious. This is really, really serious, and something has to be done. I mean, it's give with one hand and take with the other. Look, there were some small tax reductions announced yesterday. We estimate that they're about a third of the tax increases that he's announced up till now. So the average family is going to be paying £1,500 more in tax than they were before Rishi Sunak came in as Chancellor. So, let's not beat about the bush here. Rishi Sunak has raised taxes on ordinary working people whilst presiding over the biggest ever increase in wealth of millionaires and billionaires. So, yeah, I mean, it's political theatre, right? He gives very loudly and he takes very quietly, but he's taking more than he's giving. The only group to which he's given more than he's taken are the super rich, who've seen a 21% single year increase in wealth. So for Rishi Sunak himself, who's worth £200 million, if his wealth has increased in line with the average millionaire in this country, he will have made £42 million in the first year of COVID. And it's not just him, that's all of the super rich in the country. The average billionaire made £630 million in the first year of COVID. It's crazy. This is not a case of everybody's hurting, but the poor are hurting the most. This is a case of the poor and ordinary are hurting, and the rich have never, ever, ever made more money. So I know I keep banging on about it, but I'm going to keep banging on about it because the only way we save ordinary families, like the people listening to this now, is by getting that money back from the super rich. So we have to do something. I would encourage anybody listening to come and support me and call in for Rishi Sunak to raise taxes on the rich, the super rich, on millionaires like me, on millionaires like Rishi himself, so that we can support the ordinary hardworking families of this country instead of raising their taxes. What he's done, right? He's cut my taxes by 1%. Thanks, Rishi. At the same time, he's raised national insurance by 2.5%, which I don't pay and which Rishi doesn't pay, at least on his income from his wealth. because we get our money from our wealth. So he's cutting taxes on the super rich and raising taxes on working people. It's I despair, to be honest. I despair for the real consequences, because this has real consequences. If you transfer wealth from ordinary people who in many cases don't have it to the rich and the super rich, the reality of that situation is there are kids that will go hungry. There are families that will go to bed in cold houses. And there are people that will lose their homes. Also, we can make the super rich up. For what? Yeah, I don't need the money. Rishi doesn't need the money. There's a lot of people out there that do. We need to change it. If I'm being totally honest, I think he's doing it because he can get away with it. He's doing it because he can get away with it. I would strongly encourage the Labour Party to get behind my calls for more serious taxation of the rich and the super rich, closing the loopholes, introducing the wealth tax on the very, very rich. But Labour not pushing it either, So the Conservatives can do that. I despair a little bit when you see a chancellor who's worth £200 million, whose father-in-law is a billionaire, who continually brings in policies that see the super rich get richer and see ordinary people get poorer. I don't know Rishi Sunak, and I would love him to call me up and we could have a tea. I'll be happy to go up to Yorkshire and talk to him. But he's a very rich person. And while he's allowing ordinary people to suffer and cutting tax on millionaires and billionaires, I have to doubt his intentions, and if he is going to argue with that, I'm happy to talk to him. But what he's doing right now, it's not right. I'm talking about raising tax on super, super wealthy individuals. We need to attract business, but we don't want those businesses to be owned by super wealthy individuals that don't pay tax. We end up in a situation where ordinary people can't afford to own businesses and can't afford to compete with these businesses and can't even afford to own property. Listen, cut tax on workers, cut tax on business, raise tax on the super rich. These are the guys who are making out like bandits while ordinary people in this country suffer.